So, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I guess.
I'm super excited.
Great. Yeah, I thought I'd start by asking you a bit about F#.
Sure.
Because I know pretty much nothing about it. I mean, I've done a bit of Googling and reading up, and you get all the keywords, but it doesn't really tell you that much. So how did you sort of come to F#?
Around 2010, it was first included in Visual Studio. And I was at some big American conference, I forget which one, Tech Ed maybe, or... and everyone just kept saying, that was the big news in the conference. Everyone's like, you have to check out F#, it's so amazing. I was like, all right, whatever, I'll check that out sometime.
When I have the time.
Yeah, exactly. Sometime later when... And sometime in the next 6 months, I started to sort of toy with it. Just, I opened it up, I figured out what a script file did, and, and started to just play. I used the Project Euler problems, and... It seemed nice. It was fun. It was really easy to work with. It made a lot of sense to do toy things like that. And I thought, well, that's nice, but now what? Yeah,
exactly.
And about 2 years later, I think it was, there's an F# conference held by Skills Matter in New York every year, called the Progressive F# Tutorials. The first one they held, I heard about this and was like, there's this whole F# conference. This is amazing. Like,
this is for me.
Yeah, this is perfect.
Yeah.
And I was a few hours away, so I went down to the conference, and they had 2 tracks, a beginner track and an advanced track. And I was like, well...
Who knows?
I'm definitely not advanced, but it happened that both tutorials that they had the first day, I had already done. One was, I think, using the Project Euler problems to do something, and one was what's called the F# koans, which is just a whole bunch of failing tests that sort of, by fixing the tests, you work, you learn what the language looks like. And I was like, well, I've done those, so I'm definitely probably a beginner, but maybe I'll look at the advanced track and see what I learn, because, we'll see. And the first talk in the advanced track was Don Syme and Keith Batachi talking about type providers. And I just sat there, amazed the whole time. Like, this is the most incredible thing I've ever heard of in my entire life.
So the advanced track was for you.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I didn't fully understand them.
No,
not that I understand them now, but
different thing.
But yeah, it was perfect. And type providers are a way to hook in any external data source into your code. So
that comes in handy.
Obvious ones, databases, but then, there's a JSON type provider, so you can hook in any API. There's a CSV one. There's Excel. There's the WSDL type provider, if you have old web services that you need to hook in. Yeah. And it was actually that one that I sat and watched them. I was like, this would have saved the project that I'm working on right now.
Yeah, I mean, all those bothers from old connecting to other stuff.
Yeah, and there's one for the World Bank, so you can hook into the World Bank, and you get things like IntelliSense in Visual Studio, into your data, into the database or into your data set. If it's a CSV file, you can dot into what the column names are on your CSV. Yeah.
I want this now.
And F# is actually the only language. I know that some other languages were looking at having it. At least as of recently, it was the only language in the whole world that did this thing.
Oh, so it's some person who's behind F# who came up with the whole concept?
Yeah, Don Syme is, the magic grandfather of...
Magic grandfather. That's a good one to have. Santa Claus will you? No. So I mean, F#, when I looked up on Wikipedia, it has lots of these, keywords, type inference and multi-paradigm. And so which sort of aspects of it is it that appeal to you or that you use?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a lot of little things. I mean, type providers was the big thing that really sold me, and I thought, this is amazing. But then it's 100 little things that just feel smart. The type inference is nice, so that, if you think about C#, you have to declare all of your types, and sometimes, especially if you're trying to do things a little more functionally, and you get func of this, comma, this, comma, and it gets really messy and big. Yeah. And F# will just sort of handle all that for you. So you just say, let's value name equal whatever, and it figures out all of that, and it cleans up the code a lot. And then a lack of parentheses and curly braces.
Doesn't hurt.
And that's again, it's a very small thing, but it does sort of clean it up.
Oh yeah.
And I've often told people it's like having that fluorescent light blinking in the background.
Always.
And it bothers you, but as soon as somebody fixes it, that's when you really realize that.
Yeah, how bad it was.
Oh my god, yeah.
It's the same thing, a computer with a loud fan. And
exactly.
Suddenly it goes quiet. And it could have been like this all the time.
And that's really what it's like to switch to F#, is that, it's not bad in C#, but all of a sudden you're like, oh, there are all these things that really upset me that now it's so much better.
Yeah, it sounds a bit to me, because I have a little more knowledge, I should say, in the Apple world, and it sounds to me like maybe they took some inspirations from F# when it comes to Swift.
Very much so.
Yeah,
to be fair, I haven't looked at Swift that much, but my understanding from what the F# community has said is that there's a lot of inspiration in Swift from F#.
Yeah, must be. It rang sort of the similar bells when I.
Yeah, there's a lot of the common functional aspects. I know that Swift has an option type. I forget if they actually call it option, but there's.
Oh yeah, they have something called that.
Yeah, and that's one of the big features in F#. That's it's sort of like a nullable.
Yeah. They keep moving stuff around in Swift as well, so I'm not sure anything I say still applies. It might be
fair.
So F# is sort of. I mean, it sounds kind of strange to say, but maybe like a natural next step from C#.
I would say so. I think a lot of people might not feel that way, but I think the F# community certainly feels that way.
Yeah.
And it gives us great pleasure when C# often will steal features.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
Yeah, looking at like C# 5 and 6 and 7 now, you look at what the new feature list and everyone's like, so F#.
Why are we 2 languages again?
I'm just stealing new things from F#. This is great, congratulations, but you could just have these in F#.
Yeah. So is there any particular reason, apart from just plain old habit, to not switch to F# from C#?
I would say the biggest reasons, habit and a perceived lack of support from Microsoft. So a lot of folks who are very heavily enterprise think that nobody knows F#, and so they don't want to program something in F# because then who will maintain it, because nobody does it, and so they won't do it.
It's a chicken and egg. Sort of.
But my company, for example, has doubled down, and we are all F#. And we have like 65 developers who are.
And it turns out developers can learn stuff if it's good stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Amazingly, but
we found that it wasn't that hard to teach folks coming in, and people really enjoyed it.
Yeah. But was the company into F# before you got there, or was it something you sort of brought with you?
No, it was before I got there. I tried to bring it to a couple companies, one somewhat successfully, but I think after I left, it was less. I don't know that it stuck.
No, it all depends, I guess.
But they actually, the CTO at my current company, Jet.com, was actually at that same Skills Matter event that I was at.
It all sort of ties together. Nice.
I only found this out recently. I was like, I was there. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And I don't know if this was his first time learning about it, but he thought F# also has a reputation for being good with math and science and finance, and they have a big hold in the financial industry, I know. But it has this reputation for being good at those things. And so as he started to think about, we're an e-commerce site, so he wanted to think about the pricing engine. Thought, well, that's perfect. That's exactly up F#'s alley. We'll start there. We'll build the pricing engine. And so he hired a few developers who were interested in F#. And as the project sort of started to form, they started to have, maybe not arguments, but discussions about should we build this part in C# or in F#. And at one point they actually just split it up and said, we'll build 2 complete versions.
Wow.
One in F#, one in C#, and see where it goes. See what happens, see which one's better. And it turned out the F# one was better.
Yeah.
But for reasons like the cross-cutting concerns, so logging and such things, it's a lot easier to sort of just compose all these things together. Yeah. So in F# there's also this idea of a pipeline, which if you've done any Unix shell scripting, or I know PowerShell has it as well, it takes the output of the previous thing and turns it into an argument for the next thing. Yeah. And so you can very nicely pipeline things through. So say like run this function and then pipe that into logging here, and then run another function and then log that, and you go down a line and it looks really clean and really obvious in the code. And everyone just said, well, that's really wonderful. We should do all of And the few libraries that C# had just really didn't work for us, didn't work in the way that we needed them to. And so we rolled around in F#. And
it was quicker, smaller. So you did a little blog post about some part you rewrote.
Yes.
Was it this? Was it
no.
a smaller thing, right?
That was a smaller thing.
But it still had the same result.
Yeah, that was the previous company where that was somewhat successful. Yeah. That was fun. It was a very simple... we had to transfer some data from, a couple different databases, combine everything, and then put it into one at the end. And it was smaller. It ended up being way faster at the end. And I think there were 2 or 3 projects to start. This has been a couple of years now. In C#.
There won't be a test afterwards.
I don't want to say things that actually conflict with my blog. If I do, my blog is right. Because that was that week. But the F# one ended up having like half the lines of code, and it originally took an hour or a couple hours, and I had it down to like 10 seconds.
That's pretty incredible.
And fixed a bug along the way.
It's usually the case when you remove stuff.
Yeah. And that's another thing about F# is because it's smaller, and you can... there's this idea of what's called a discriminated union. So you can take a very basic object hierarchy as one example. You can do many other things, but there's a base class and 3 classes that inherit from it. And instead of having 4 totally separate files, you can usually model that as 4 lines in F#.
That's quicker to read. I take it.
Yeah, and then you can have like 10 of those all within one file. So it's like... sometimes your entire model is just one file.
And then why split it up? I can see it here.
Yeah. And so it's things like that just, if you can stare at it very quickly and see what you're doing, just make fewer mistakes.
It adds up very quickly too.
Yeah.
We'll take it. That's fascinating.
And I use type providers on that one.
That makes sense. Databases.
So I just, I connected to one database, the type provider, and I could dot in IntelliSense and grab the stuff. And
just IntelliSense on something like that.
It's huge.
It's wonderful.
And it's really fast. Like the World Bank one has... you can dot into a list of countries, and so you can scroll through this enormous list of all the countries in the world, and then from there you dot in to what's called indicators. So the indicators are all the random pieces of information that it has. The percent of GDP that comes from farming, or totally not random, but huge amounts of information, and there's several thousand, and you can just scroll through all of these basically instantly.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
IntelliSense seems to be pretty nice too.
Yeah.
I've done very little development in anything in Visual Studio really, but it seems like IntelliSense is one of those really big things.
It makes you a little lazy, but it's also really wonderful.
There's such a big difference between autocomplete that almost helps you and the one that actually does.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, the one in Xcode can be so. For example,
I've done a little bit of, there's a company called Xamarin who is, so I've done some Xamarin development. And sometimes you have to load up Xcode to properly hook everything up. And I love to hate Xcode.
It's one of those IDEs. Really, it has many good sides as well, but...
I'm sure that it does, but...
It's easy to start to dislike it. And now it's... was it this spring when Microsoft open sourced a whole bunch of... Wasn't something concerning IntelliSense included in that?
It may have been. I don't remember what all was.
No. But that seems even more interesting now when you talk about IntelliSensing into data sources.
Well, that's almost all. Most of the F# stuff has been open sourced since 2010.
Yeah.
So that actually I haven't gone and looked at. I know sort of how the type providers work, but I don't know.
No, but it's there if you want to find out.
Exactly.
Yeah, the language started in 2005, right?
2005-ish. I know very originally they had wanted it to be Haskell. They wanted to bring Haskell to the .NET. And I know for several reasons that just ended up not working. And Don and then a couple of the other folks around there were fans of ML. And so they chose Ocaml because it's object-oriented, so that would already have some features that'll play nicely. And he had to lobby really hard to get generics into C#. Otherwise, that would never have...
Never have.
Yeah. And then from there, it was around 2005 that I think it really started to take traction, and then 2010 is when it was in Visual Studio.
Yeah, so it has some time to grow.
Yeah.
Has it changed a lot along the way?
A fair amount. Not... I mean, type providers were brand new in 2012-ish, and I know there have been huge new things, lots of optimizations, but nothing as big as type providers that I recall offhand.
No. Someone else probably thinks, oh, they missed this thing.
I know. Someone will yell at me for that.
Yeah, someone's favorite feature. So, and it performs really well.
I know. I just recently held a conference in New York and had John Harrop, who is very big into optimization. You know, really, he has been able to make F# perform at C++ speeds.
Wow. Because that's usually another thing that people sort of dig up when they talk about a new language. They're like, but does it perform as well?
Yeah, but it's slow. It doesn't. It just can't possibly.
Surely it's slow, right? But it's not then.
To be fair, it can be slow.
Oh, yeah, I mean, anything can.
Yeah, so I think some of the defaults, but if you pay attention, if you optimize, it certainly can be very quick.
If you need to,
yeah,
it can be as quick as you need.
Yeah.
It's pretty nice.
Yeah, that's always really impressed me. And is always such a good way to shut down anyone who's saying, no, but it's slow. Yeah, but not for John.
No, exactly. Go ask him. Yeah, or just set your rewrite there.
Yeah.
Save some time.
One of the favorite comments in the F# community now is, release the Harrop. John's last name is Harrop. Somebody says it's slow. Release the Harrop.
You hear the rumbling in the distance.
No! I'm sorry, it's not slow.
No, I didn't mean it.
Yeah.
So Xamarin they do sort of cross-platform
mobile development. Xamarin is really neat. I love the whole Xamarin idea. I love what they're doing. They concentrate on C#, but they love F# too. So they support both? Very much, yep. The F# support is often like a step behind, but it's only a step. It's not, 4 years or anything. But yeah, you can cross-platform apps. You can, the iOS, Android. You can throw in Windows, and it compiles down to native. So you can actually, it's not one of the JavaScript frameworks.
Exactly. You don't just pack it in a view and pretend it's...
Exactly, So it is properly native.
Yeah. So you use Xamarin for work?
I would really like to. I keep pushing it at every angle I can find. We have a couple people at the company who are really big Xamarin proponents and push it as much as we can, but
it doesn't quite fit what you do at work? Or?
Not yet. They hired all of us way after they had started developing their app. And so they're like, well, we're not going to rebuild it now, but maybe in a couple of years when we do,
So the whole focus for Xamarin is mobile.
Yes. Yeah. I know they do Mac desktop apps as well.
I saw something about it. So.
Yeah. I have never tried to write one.
No.
I tried to help out and fix something within the Xamarin editor itself once, which is a really fun and bizarre experience because you have to load up Xamarin, you have to load the solution into Xamarin to run another copy of Xamarin.
Editing the right one.
Yeah. Like, which one am I testing? Which one is running now?
Oh yeah.
So that was
interesting.
That was a bizarre.
Yeah, developing the development environment.
Yeah.
Not for the faint of heart.
It took me like a week to get a drop-down box included.
Oh yeah. That sounds pretty quick too, actually. But Xamarin itself is written in C# or something else?
It's built heavily on the Mono framework, which is a...
Oh yeah. So how did you run into Xamarin in the first place?
I started working for a company in Tennessee for a while that was heavy into Xamarin development. Mm-hmm. And so I had heard of it for a while. I knew that...
Yeah, I've heard of it as well.
Yeah, and that was like I had owned a Mac for a while, and so I would use Xamarin to run like F# scripts, but never proper mobile development, but just using their editor. Yeah. And when I worked for this company, I was like, well, I know, I've never done mobile development. I know nothing about it, but I would love to try it. This sounds fun.
Yeah.
And I went down and started working on iOS development mainly with Xamarin. And it was the work we'd do C# by day, and I'd go home and be like, okay, I think I've got this. I can, rewrite these concepts in F#. It ended up being really easy to, once I'd figured out the concepts in C# to convert over.
Yeah. And once you know what you're doing, it's...
Yeah.
You probably do a better version as well. even if you were to rewrite it a second time in the same language, you probably do some.
Probably, and it's the API over the iOS stuff, and I'm sure the Android as well, is very similar. They'll use the same terminology, and so it was really more learning all of the the Xamarin API, learning the iOS cover they had rather than learning anything more about C# or F#. Yeah. So it was fun. I built a few little games. I built a version of Minesweeper.
Oh, nice. Everyone needs that.
Exactly.
It's a great one. Oh, yeah. I wanted to ask a bit about the MIT study.
This was... I had actually forgotten about that blog post until you mentioned it.
Yeah.
That one took me ages to write.
Yeah.
I tweaked it and wasn't sure. So the MIT study... I read about this actually in college, and I'll date myself here, in the late 90s, and the study had taken place just a couple years before, but it started by just a few of the women engineers or professors. I think it was mostly engineering department, just chatting to each other, and they started to realize that we've had a lot of these same experiences. Maybe we should really look at this, and so they gathered everyone, and all 40 or so women in all of the STEM technologies that were professors. And I think they even include the grad students as well. I think there was a mix there. And they just took a basic survey, what's happened to you, what do you feel? I don't know that they released the actual survey. And it turned the major results from it, which were the sort of terrifying and interesting pieces to me as a young woman in STEM, were that the young women generally, the grad students, tended to think that sexism was over. It wasn't a thing anymore. They would just
problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's if somebody makes a comment, then we just think they're an idiot, and you move on. Yeah. The middle career women were definitely starting to get burnt out, and that this has been happening too long. Why is this still happening? It's definitely a problem, but what do we do now? And the older women, if they hadn't left entirely, were just sort of resigned. It was a thing. I did my best. Yeah.
It's so sad.
It was, and it really hit home for me because I was part of a group called Women in Science and Engineering that really gathered us all together as undergrads, and we had study groups, and we were in the same classes, and it was a really wonderful experience to be there. And we had one specific class where they actually taught us about famous women in science. It was a really neat. We learned a lot about Rosalind Franklin, who helped discover DNA, and one of the cap of that class was to write a report. And so they brought in all of these women from around the community, and we got to interview them. And I'm not good at making decisions. I never have been. And so when they brought in all of these women, I was like, well, I want to interview all 3 of these. And there were like 10 or 15. I could have chosen all of them probably. But
given time.
It turned out that it was exactly like one young, I think she was a PhD student, one mid-career woman who owned her own lab, and one older woman who was maybe 5 years from retirement. Yeah. I was like, oh, that just conveniently worked out.
Yeah.
And I had no plans when I thought they were all interesting.
Yeah.
And it worked out sort of exactly like the study said it would.
Oh, yes. It was almost scary. I read the blog post and then almost all of the report as well.
Yeah. And yeah.
This is too similar.
and you know, the grad student was almost word for word, like, I don't think this is an issue.
Yeah.
It's, you know, I just think if anyone says something, then it's not a big deal. And I was at that point. I agreed. I was even younger than she was. And the mid-career woman, she owned her own lab. She was in charge of her own lab. She was very much at the top of her. And she was like, "Yeah, I got all sorts of flack for trying to, for having kids, and people were saying things like, 'Are you actually going to come back to science?' And that was really hard. And now I have to fight. I have less money than my colleagues who have their own labs, and I notice it. I'm drained. It is hard. And we had met for breakfast, and she showed me around the lab, maybe coffee, and she just ranted the whole time.
Lots of steam to let off. Yeah.
Exactly. I was like, okay.
This feels good.
Yeah, do I want this now?
Yeah.
And then the older woman, she hadn't left science entirely, but she was an editor. And she was an editor for the Physical Review, which is a very, very important, prestigious. But she was still an editor. Yeah. And I came back thinking, like, she's not practicing science anymore.
No,
I mean,
exactly.
she's very much involved. She clearly knows what she's doing.
But sort of off to the side. Anyway.
Yeah. And once I sort of put that through, and, like, I finished my paper, and I was like, this is the most depressing thing I've ever heard. I hope it's not like this for me.
Now what?
Yeah, like,
so how do you move on from there?
Yeah, and it's... I can say it's fairly played out in my life. Yeah. I was definitely, gung-ho. I was given a lot of opportunities as a young developer, everything. And that's the other thing. A lot of people very much encourage young women, but young developers in general, like, you'll be great at this, just stick with it. Yeah. And then there comes a point where you're sort of too senior to be encouraged anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that's sort of when it starts to hit.
Oh, yeah.
And you start being questioned and like, well, are you really senior enough for this? Yeah. And
you start questioning yourself.
Yeah.
I do that all the time.
Exactly. And I think I was definitely... I made a lot of friends early, and I was very heavily involved in community and user groups as very much a newbie when I didn't know anything. And I had a few people recognize that I was smart and I was asking the right questions. But then because I was in these groups, people started to assume that I was smart and knowledgeable. And then I'd ask these questions, and they're like, oh, you're not. Oh.
I thought it sounded good up to that point.
Yeah, like, no. And it sort of took jumping over to the F# community, actually, to be allowed to be a beginner again. Yeah. And it's... like, I stopped asking all those questions. I was like, I don't want people to think I'm an idiot, but I don't actually know this, and people think I'm senior, and like, what do I do? And then the F# community they're like, yes, a beginner, you want to learn? How can we help? All right. It's really, so even now, I would still say I'm a beginner. Like, there's so many things I don't know that I know other folks in the community do know, but I don't feel... it's okay to ask all these things.
Exactly. When the community is right, it feels so good to be a beginner.
Yeah.
I don't know this. Can anyone tell me something?
Yeah.
Instead of, I'm probably stupid. Everyone else has figured this out and I should just back up.
Yeah. I'll shut up and not... Yeah. And so it's been really freeing, I would say.
Yeah. Do you know if the F# community did something active to end up this way, or is it just lucky coincidence?
I would say Don, the creator of the language, definitely is open and friendly and encourages everyone. And I think from there, he attracted other people who were like that. I don't know that there's any specific, well, yes and no. I think the people who are in the community recognize that this is one of the wonderful things about it, and so we actively maintain. So we're, good about helping beginners come in. We try to be nice and friendly, and let me show you how this is done. Like this is this really cool feature. We're more excited than like, how could you not know such a thing?
Yeah, go and read the manual.
Exactly.
So it's more that it started out in a good way, and then people recognized it. And
I think so.
And
it's like the very first talk I gave as part of the community. I had one webcast that I had done like 2 or 3 years before that was just a disaster. And it's not bad. I was horribly nervous. I was terrified about everything. And it was the first talk.
Yeah, sure.
So it was after that Skills Matter event. The two folks who ran the New York F# user group invited me down to speak. And I think they thought I had been speaking, which I haven't been. And, I was like, well, I could probably give a beginner talk, I guess. And it was like the sum total of everything I knew about F# in 45 minutes. It wasn't even like an hour and a half. But on my way down to the talk, Don actually wished me good luck. Like, the guy who invented the language is saying, good luck on this, you'll be fabulous.
And that, right.
Yeah.
And
that was just nice. Like, that was neat. And then after I gave the talk, the folks at the user group were all really friendly. They were nice about it. And I just remember thinking, like, okay, I survived. I didn't die during that talk.
I didn't explode or melt away. Or anything.
Exactly. I'm still alive, maybe I could keep doing this. And it's just been very encouraging. Everyone's, people still want me to speak, apparently.
I mean, the whole community and just... the people in individual groups, it makes such a big difference. I mean, I try to go to as many developer meetups in Gothenburg, where I live, as possible. And I mean, it's not a super huge community. I mean, you run into the same people pretty frequently, but still, I mean, there's enough of a difference between the various groups that it's so different how much people speak up about things. I mean, in some groups, like I was involved in the Cocoa Heads group for a while. And there it was. I really had to put in work to get people to speak, or just stand up and say anything. And some groups, like the Node meetup, for some reason, there people just keep talking. Like, someone talks for 20 minutes, and someone says, "Yeah, I could talk a little bit about this thing," and that never happened in the Cocoa community. So.
Wow, I know that when I actually went down to Tennessee and worked there for the company where I learned Xamarin, they have a really interesting functional programming user group that just combines all the languages. And they have a format where instead of giving one talk, they usually do like 4 or 5 small talks. So 15, 20 minutes. And, what's cool? What are you working on right now? Like, whether or not it's done, just what are you doing? And that's a really, easy format. One guy will often do a definitions. What is a monad? What is... or even, what's type inference? Just a very simple...
you just need something to start with, because something interesting always comes up. It doesn't matter if you're standing in front of people or sitting down around the table. Something fun always comes up.
And they'll have a couple of those each time. And then I ran actually a user group in Vermont, a functional user group. It was a very small group, only like 10 of us. But the talks usually, especially my talks, it was always something I was sort of feeling out. Like, I don't really have this developed yet. I don't really know if I know what I'm talking about, but let me try it.
It's like a beta version.
Exactly. And I could practice it, and then they would start asking questions, and usually about half an hour into the talk, it would just, end up being a whole discussion. And so
it just rolls along all of a sudden.
And somebody saying, well, this is how it works in Clojure. Is that how it works in F#? Is that, is this what Scala folks do? Everyone's like, well, actually, this is...
And then you get people talking.
And
it's such a difficult thing as well to get people to stand up and say something for the first time. I don't know if there are any good tricks there.
No. Just lots of prodding, lots of... this is a safe place. It'll... I'm trying to do something like that internally at work. Get the developers to have like a weekly whether or not they're slides, even if they just, put up their laptop and say, this is the cool bit of code I wrote this week.
Yeah.
Then
it's a good start as well.
Exactly. Maybe look at
because in the beginning, you never feel as if you have anything interesting to say.
Yeah.
This thing, tons of people have done that, right?
It doesn't matter, whatever.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, I don't feel like... we use React at work. And we just recently started a React meetup. And talking to the guy who started it made me realize, okay, we've probably been using React for longer than anyone else in this town. I should be able to say something interesting, right? And still I sit down and look at what we've done, and the code, and it's like, is it really interesting to anyone else? I know when other people speak, I know how it works. I can see it from outside, and I still can't quite push myself to realize it.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly, I think a lot of the developers that I work with now think that.
Yeah.
And we're, we double down on F#, on microservices, on Azure, on... and no one else is doing this. No. And they're like, but I'm not doing anything special.
No, I'm just solving our little problem here.
This is fascinating, you guys.
Yeah. Is it some kind of a developer mindset thing that does it?
I have no idea. It's weird that people are convinced.
Yeah, I'm convinced I'm not doing anything unique for some reason, except a few people. I mean, some people seem you can just teleport them into the stage and go. Yeah. And they talk about something, and it's really interesting.
Yeah.
But those are...
Yeah, some people are just naturals.
Yeah. Kind of unfair.
How dare they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, tying back to the MIT thing, this entering and believing something isn't a problem, that kind of feels like maybe it's sort of a developer mindset thing as well. It's like it's like it's like the dark side of the X-Files. I want to believe. It's like that. I really want to believe that this is a thing that's past.
Yeah, everything is fine.
Yeah, I can see that. I think in my own mindset about things, because I have this initial, positive attitude that someone said this, they probably didn't mean it, or they weren't thinking about it.
It's just the one that
it's an exception. And
there was actually a really interesting post. This was several years ago now. Somebody wrote a blog post on how it is only sort of a few people, but those few people will talk to 5 or 6 different people, and anyone who is a minority ends up being affected in disproportionately large numbers. That's just because of the few outlying people.
You have that little core or the seeds.
And there was a diagram of certain blue and yellow circles or something, and they connected them all, and you could see
how it flows.
And it was, I wish I could remember what it was or where it was. I'll have to Google that for you. But that was fascinating to see that it really is only 10% of people that will say something really horrible and obnoxious. But it really does affect.
And it spreads out, and suddenly it seems like everyone is on the bad side from my own perspective.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to 10 conferences a year, you'll hear something terrible at one of them.
And maybe it falls back to one person said once, and then it's sort of everything people consider facts. That's.
But I like your analogy to the X-Files.
I don't know where it came from. But
That's awesome.
But I would really like it to be like this. And then, it's pretty dangerous, really. Now I think of it from the other perspective. I mean, how many things do I ignore that really are problems because I don't...
It just never could...
I don't want it to be a problem. And that's how we end up in situations like that. Because we don't want...
And it took me a really long time for even me to start recognizing and realizing that it was something that I really needed to educate myself on.
And I've heard other people make comments like that as well about discrimination and related things like, no, surely that's not a problem. And then someone who's a few years ahead goes, you'll see. And they go, no, they're old and grumpy.
Yes, it is.
Old and cynical. It's difficult.
And it is... it's frustrating to me now to hear young folks be like, "Oh, it's not a problem." I'm like, no.
If we keep working on it, it may not be a problem. But if we stop working it,
yeah, and it is better. Like, every generation it definitely gets better, but it's
that was a nice part about the report.
Yeah, that like they were able to actually really make some serious changes when they started to.
Yeah.
And it's I can even see changes from 10 years ago in the ways people act and then some of the things that have been put in place. The disheartening thing, I remember I had lots of conversations with my mother, who was one of the first women admitted to her PhD program. Wow. So it was the first year that the university was opening any of their PhD programs to women. And we'd go on and on. She's like, I had those same issues. I had the same, making those same comments.
Damn.
But that, I mean, again, she was, the few women in the entire university, and here it's, one of the few women in the computer science department. So it's a smaller group. It's, one of the last few outliers. But
hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. So there's been progress everywhere else.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
So did all the report and writing and everything, did it make any sort of conscious changes to what you do?
Unfortunately, not at the time. I sort of noted it at the back of my mind, and again, I was young. I thought, I'll see if this is really an issue, but surely it won't be. Things have gotten so much better.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was when I was working at a job and had a supervisor who was just awful. Mm-hmm. Would come in and scream at me in the morning and and say really horrible things. And I had my coworkers, instead of recognizing and acknowledging it, just say, "Oh, you don't understand him. No. He's not like that. He's not really this terrible person you're making him out to be."
Yeah.
And it was after like 6, 7, 8 months of this that I was like, okay, seriously, there's a problem. Now I understand.
Yeah.
But because it was just basically like nobody believed me. Everyone.
Oh, that's bad.
And it wouldn't have been so horrible. It was awful, but it wasn't like. I have heard other stories about people who've had books thrown at them, telephones thrown at them.
Yeah. I've heard stories as well.
He was just screwed. And it was actually at that job where I did the podcast. No. And his comment after my first podcast, where I was terrified, it was so awful, was, "That was awful, you need to redo this." What was that? It's like,
why do I even try?
Yeah. And it was just having everyone else just flat out not believe me that there was an issue.
That's strange as well. Because the worst cases I've experienced or seen or heard about, at least people around usually realize there's a problem. But there's still usually this aspect of, but you don't really understand him, or you have to see where he's coming from. And it's
I had to tell them, and then they came back with that. And so that's when I sort of did, I remembered the study, and I'm like, oh, man. Okay. Now I have to work.
Yeah, exactly. We all have to.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's good to have your blog post to point to. Maybe that promised follow-up will come in a few more years.
Yeah, I really should. I should be a lot more active on that blog, too.
That's the way most blogs are. Right? There's so much to do all the time.
There is.
Yeah, so little time. Well, this was great.
This was a lot of fun, definitely.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you tons.
Let me put it this way, Mr. Raymer. The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information. We are all, by any practical definition of the words, foolproof and incapable of error.